we study through and look through the Gospel of Matthew. Today we are going to be in Matthew chapter 13. We're going to look at verses 24 through 43, where Jesus is going to tell three different parables. He is going to tell the parable of the wheat and tares, the parable of the mustard seed, and the parable of leaven. All three of those parables are really pictures of corruption among the kingdom community. All three of those parables are really prophecies about the church. So we have three different prophecies that we are going to look at. And just to remind you of what we talked about yesterday, it was the context of all that this is going in. Jesus started yesterday telling us a parable, and the parable was about the four different types of soil. It's about the person's heart. It's the kind of heart that receives God or rejects God, or the kind of heart that looks like it springs to life, but really doesn't have any life in it whatsoever. So let's picture it this way, that you have people that come to life. Now those people that have come to life, the heart that is good, the soil that is good, now springs forth into the church. And so Jesus is going to tell three different parables that really relate to the prophecy of what the church is going to be and what the church is going to look like. So we're going to get into it today, and we're going to look at all three of these different prophecies. Let's start with prophecy number one. Number one is going to be the parable of the wheat and tares. Let's look at this together. Another parable he put forth to them, and this is the parable after the parable of the four types of soil. So another parable that he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? Tares would have been the bad weeds that were growing in the field. It resembled wheat, but it really wasn't wheat. He said to them, an enemy has done this. The servant said to him, do you want us to go up? Do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, first gather them together, the tares, and bind them into the bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So wait until the harvest field. When the harvest happens, then you're going to separate out the wheat and the tares. You're going to burn up the tares, and you're going to gather the wheat into my barn. So the first type of prophecy that is being talked about is the current state of what the kingdom of God is going to look like. This is a twofold kind of prophecy. One, Jesus was saying this is what the kingdom of Israel looks like today. In the kingdom of Israel, you have both the good and the bad together, mixed together in the same field. But it's also going to be a picture of what the church is going to look like. Within the church, you're going to have, making up any church body, both wheat and tares. In any church, you have both people that are genuine believers and you have people that are not genuine believers. People that they may look the part, they may seem the part, but they really haven't received Christ. And in every church, you have a combination of both wheat and tares in the church. And so let's go back to what that had said. It said as the guy was sleeping that an enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. So what it's describing is the work of an enemy who is trying to destroy the work of the man who had sown the good seed in his field. The purpose of the enemy was to sow tares among the wheat in order to destroy the wheat. But the wise farmer would not allow the enemy to succeed. Instead, the farmer decided to sort it out at harvest time. It clearly represents and promotes the fact that there's going to be corruption among the people of God. Now, this is very similar to what Jesus had said in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. He said, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. By the way, that is the same thing that Paul was going to say in Acts chapter 20, verse 29. He was meeting with a group of the elders from the church in Ephesus, and Paul warned them. He said, I know that after my departure, Fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. In Matthew chapter 25, verses 32 and 33, Jesus is going to say that at the harvest time that there will be gathered all nations, and he will separate people from another, one from another. One will be, it will be the same way that the sheep are separated from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right, but the goats will go on his left. And so what he's saying here is this, that there will be corruption that will happen in the church. People often get disillusioned about the church because churches are not genuine. They're not real. They're hypocritical. The people in churches are hypocritical. Well, this should not be a surprise to any of us because Jesus had warned that this would happen. Anytime you have true wheat, real, genuine believers that are growing up in the Lord, you're also going to have mixed in among the wheat, you're going to have the tares. The tares, according to Richard France, he said that the weeds were probably called darnel, which is a poisonous plant related to wheat and virtually indistinguishable from it until the ears form. What he's saying is this, that growing up in the church, you can't tell who is genuine and who is not. We can't know each other's hearts. We don't know what's in each other's hearts. Only time will tell. When the wheat springs up and is ready for harvest, and the tares spring up, and you realize that, hey, this is not legitimate, you will realize who is destined for the harvest and who is destined for the fire. That should be a warning to us. The warning should be that churches are filled with people who really don't know Christ, and it's filled with people who genuinely do know Christ. The church is not the building. It is not the local assembly and the local congregations. The church is made up of all believers worldwide. So in any brick and mortar building, in any given church congregation, you have people that are part of the church and people that are not part of the church. People that are part of the church universal, the church worldwide, which are the believers, the wheat, the sheep that are truly following him. But at the same time, in every church, you have people that have been planted there, people who don't know God, people that the enemy is using to bring division and destruction within a church. Anytime there is division and destruction, anytime that there are people going against the kingdom of God, they are tares within the church. So Jesus gives a warning, the first prophecy of what the church is going to look like. The church is going to be filled with both wheat and tares. Then he's going to give a second type of parable. And the second type of parable is the prophecy of the church, number 2, is the parable of the mustard seed. And so Jesus, again, is going to describe what the church is going to be like, what the church is going to experience. He says these words. He says, another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all the seeds. Now, if you've seen any pictures of a mustard seed, you will notice that the mustard seed is the smallest of all of the seeds. It is an incredibly small seed, but he says, indeed, it is the least of the seeds, but when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs, and it becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. Now, a normal mustard seed will grow into not a tree, it really grows into a kind of a bush. So what Jesus is saying is that the mustard seed is going to grow into something that is exponentially larger than even they could have predicted. It's more than a seed, it's more than a bush, it is going to grow into a massive tree. Well, that's what the church was going to be. The church started off incredibly small in the day of Jesus. After Jesus left, the church consisted of a handful of people. But that handful of people has grown from a small seed into a massive movement around the world where hundreds of millions of people, according to all time, have been saved and will be together with God in his kingdom for all eternity. This small little movement has grown into a massive tree. Now, again, something that is hidden in this picture of the prophecy of the church is that the church, not only does it start small and grow into something very large, but also corruption sneaks in. This is another description of corruption in the kingdom community. It's a description that most people overlook and don't see. And here's the thing that is being said, that the birds of the air that come and nest in the branches are really pictures of what destruction is. Now, my wife loves birds. She looks forward to the robins coming back. There are some certain kind of birds, though, that she really hates. And those birds are the scavenger birds that really just destroy everything. There's types of birds that she really hates more than others. Ravens, starlings are another one of those. She hates it because they're a very destructive kind of a bird. Well, that's the picture of what is happening here. The birds are not the people. The people are represented in the tree. The tree is the picture of the church. When you become a part of the church, you're a part of the tree. You're grafted into the tree. That also fits with what Romans talks about. You're grafted into the branches, into this tree. It's the birds that are the picture of what is wrong. In Matthew 13, earlier, yesterday, what we read, in Matthew 13, verses 4 and 19, the birds were the emissaries of Satan. They were used by Satan to pluck away the seed that had been sown. So, in the context of what is just being said, the language that is being said, the birds are really the enemy of the good, enemy of what God is doing. And so you have the church again blooming and growing from a small seed into a massive tree, and Satan is coming in again trying to create corruption. First, you had the picture of corruption that the tares were sown among the wheat. Now you have the picture of corruption that the birds are nesting in the branches of the tree or of the church. People are coming into the church which have ill purposes and bad intentions because their purpose is the destruction of the church. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to destroy the church that God has so lovingly died for and so lovingly created. People get disillusioned with the church because they picture these people that are actually birds or these people that are actually tares as the real representation of the church. They're not. The real representation of the church is the wheat and the mustard seed that has grown into the tree. And so Jesus again is using a picture of the of what the church is going to be. The church is going to be the field growing wheat. The church is going to be the tree. The enemy is coming in to try to destroy it. Well, let's look at a third parable that Jesus is going to give. And the third parable is a picture of, again, what is going to happen in the church. It's a picture of, prophecy number 3 is a picture of the parable of leaven. Let's look at this together. Another parable Jesus spoke to them. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. Now, this would have just been kind of a shocking parable that Jesus would have used for the people there because leaven always consistently was a picture of sin. Leaven was the picture of corruption. It was used in the Passover narrative in Exodus chapter 12. Leaven had to be removed because leaven represented corruption in the kingdom community and it represented sin. So it would have been a shock to the people to hear the kingdom of God being compared to leaven. So what was Jesus doing here? Well, he was possibly doing 2 things at once. He was giving a prophecy again about what the church was going to look like. The church would be, according to these parables, the church would be filled with both wheat and tares. You can't tell which is which. It will be determined at the harvest time. The church is also going to be the picture of birds that are sneaking into the tree. The church is the mustard seed. It starts small, grows into something enormously large, and the birds are coming in to try to create destruction in what God is doing. And here, in this picture of the leaven, the two possibilities are these, and maybe it's both that Jesus is doing together. Leaven is an influencing work in the meal. So if you're going to bake a loaf of bread and you put leaven in, it influences the bread because the bread now starts to rise because of the leaven in it. So maybe he is saying this, that the church is an influencing effect upon the world. At the same time, because leaven was used as a picture of corruption, he may have been saying the world will have an influencing effect upon the church. Maybe both is being said at once. The church will influence the world, and the world will influence the church. The second part of that is not in a good manner. The church should not be influenced by the world. It should not be affected by the world. But in so many ways, the church has been affected by the world. We have moved as a church closer and closer and closer to the world's standards, further and further away from God's standards. And so Jesus uses this parable to describe what's going to happen to the church. The church not only will influence the world, but the world will influence the church in a very negative way and in a corrupt way. Again, these are all Satan's plans. God's plan is the planting of the church, the building of the church, the bringing up of wheat, the harvesting the wheat, the growing something from a small, minute seed into a massive movement worldwide. God's plan is that the church influences the world, but instead, what you see here is the opposite going to happen by Satan's plan. Satan's plan is that he will sneak tares into the church to begin to influence the church and to destroy the wheat. He will influence by sending birds in among the tree, and the birds will begin to affect the tree. It will affect the purposes of the tree, the functioning of the tree. He will sneak leaven into the church and thereby distort the church and cause the church to move further and further away from God. All you have to do is look at the major denominations that were maybe a generation or two ago incredible massive movements for God's purposes in this world, and now they are so corrupt and have fallen so far away from God because they have been influenced by the world. I'm amazed at how many churches are openly promoting gay marriage, which is anti what God says. How many churches are openly promoting abortion, which is against what God says? How many churches are promoting an agenda that is so opposite of what God has said? And what has happened? Well, the corruption has snuck into the church and begun to affect the church from within. What did Paul warn about? What did Jesus warn about? Ravenous wolves will come in among you, thereby tearing apart the church. Jesus knows that the picture of the church is to be the wheat. The picture of the church is to be the tree. The picture of the church is to be the influencing factor in the world. And instead, Satan has designed that the opposite be the case. Because Satan wants to destroy God's movement, God's people here in this world. Well, let's finish up with the meaning of all of this. What the meaning behind all of this is, what the meaning behind that wheat and tares parable is. Jesus, it says this about him. All these things Jesus spoke to the multitudes in parables, and without a parable he did not speak to them, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things kept secret from the foundation of the world. Now, just a couple of notes here. Without a parable, he did not speak to them, does not mean that Jesus never in his entire teaching and preaching ministry spoke in anything other than a parable. It just describes this particular encounter, this particular teaching session that Jesus had done. He was speaking in parables during that time. Another reason he spoke in parables about the kingdom community is because the church itself was part of the things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world that he just related to. That reminds us of what it says in Ephesians chapter 3. It's in verses 4 through 11, and Paul relates to and talks about the mystery of the church, the mystery that was going to be revealed to the Gentiles, the mystery that was coming through what God was going to do. And he refers to that in Ephesians. So Jesus is saying, look, there's some secret things that have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. The things that have been kept secret is that Jesus was going to be the way, and that the church was going to be the plan that would happen and be revealed in these next in this next few chapters, and it was going to be revealed in the remainder of the New Testament that was God's plan. And then Jesus sent the multitude away, and he went into the house. His disciples came to him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field." Jesus then explained to them what was going on. He explained the parable to his disciples who were asking the question, please explain this to us. And Jesus said, he answered and said, "He who sows the good seed is the Son of Man." Jesus is the one who is sowing the good seed. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. And he says, the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So he put the plot in order that Jesus is the one who is scattering the seed. The field represents the world. The wheat that grows up are the ones who accept Christ and begin to follow him. The ones who are the tares are the ones that the devil planted. The devil sowed these ones among the wheat. The harvest will happen at the end of the age, at the end of time. There will be a harvest. The reapers are going to be the angels. The angels are going to have a specifically important role in this, apparently. Once the harvest is gathered and there is no more, the wheat will go to eternity with God. The tares will be burned up in the fire, and it's not just the fire. It is going to be the perpetual torment. The fate, according to Charles Spurgeon, the fate of these ungodly ones will be fire, the most terrible of punishments, but this will not annihilate them. We are not annihilationists. They will not be annihilated, for they shall exhibit the surest tokens of a living woe, that is the wailing and the gnashing of teeth. And so there is an eternal punishment that is going to happen for the tares, and there is an eternal treasure that is going to happen for the wheat. The wheat are given the privilege of spending eternity with God, eternity with the plan, the new Jerusalem that will happen, that we'll talk about in Revelation. But the ultimate outcome of the wheat, the good ones that are growing up in the world that Jesus has planted, they will find hope in eternity with Jesus. So that's an important, significant end to all things. So he says, the Son of Man will send out his angels. They will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. I hope that makes sense to you, that you understand that, the whole picture of what Jesus is doing. So he's given three parables. He gave the parable of the wheat and the tares, the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of leaven. It's all a prophecy of what the church was going to be. The church would come out of the world. The church are the true believers that are growing up as wheat. The devil is planting tares among the wheat to try to destroy and choke out the wheat. So it's important you stay persistent and perseverant in how you follow God, staying committed to him, clinging to him. Then the church is going to be like the mustard seed that grows from a small little insignificant seed, like it was at the very beginning when Jesus ascended into heaven, and it will grow into this massive tree, and the devil will send forth birds into the tree to try to divide and destroy the work that God is doing. And then it will be the leaven. The church will be an influencing factor in the world, but the world will in turn influence the church. All three of these things are prophetic things that Jesus is saying is going to happen. The most important part of all of it, though, is that you and I stay stay consistent and persevering in Jesus, that we are wheat because we have accepted Jesus' forgiveness. We have accepted his plan for salvation. We are trusting him with our very souls. When you trust him and follow him, in the end, when the harvest happens and the end of all things happen, he will separate out the wheat from the tares. He will separate out the sheep from the goats. He will separate out his chosen, his beloved, his church from those who have rejected him throughout all time. When that happens, that division happens. There will be those who go and spend eternity with him, that they will be in the kingdom of their Father. They will be righteous. They will be shining forth like the sun. And then there will be those that are cast into that outer darkness, that will be cast into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. It is important and it is imperative that you have trusted in Jesus as Savior. It is important and imperative that you are committed to him. You're not letting the world influence you, but you are influencing the world around you. Well, God bless you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope that you are truly wheat. I hope that you are truly his sheep. His sheep hear his voice, they know his voice, and they follow him and are committed to him. And I hope that that is who you are. God bless you. Have a great day, and I will see you back here tomorrow as we get back into the end of Matthew 13 with some more teachings that Jesus is going to give.